Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Have you ever felt invisible? That no matter what you say or do, no one's listening, or that your opinions don't matter, that you literally feel like you're in this cycle of isolation. No matter what, you feel overlooked, unheard, unseen, even when you feel like you are standing in a crowd. Over time, these feelings of constant invisibility and unimportance can erode your self-esteem and your self-confidence and shift your mindset from positive to thinking in worst case all the time. That's why you and I are taking a one-on-one deep dive into why you may feel invisible and how to get out of this cycle so that you can hear yourself, connect with others, and change these feelings for your overall well-being. Let's not waste another second more. This is a big topic that can literally change the way that you feel in a very short amount of time. Let's get right to it. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. Oof. All right, buckle up. This is a big conversation. It's a conversation that I've had so many times. And let me also say, this is a conversation I've had with myself. There have been plenty of times in my life where I have stepped back and felt like I was not seen, that I was not heard, that I felt invisible. And it is a lonely and isolating cycle. And when you find the courage to speak up and no one validates those feelings, it can be even more painful. Last week on the podcast, I talked about validation, it being a two-step process. If there is no internal validation, the external validation means nothing. If there is internal, but there is no external, it's hard to match up these feelings, these expressions of our lives. If you haven't heard that podcast, I do encourage you to go back and listen to it. It's episode 329, Common Misconceptions About Validation. It's not a prerequisite to this conversation by any means, but it may help you kind of understand where I'm coming from. Today, what I want to do is give you an understanding that at one point or another, many of us feel invisible. We're left with this understanding that no matter what, we do not matter. And that could not be further from the truth. In order to move past these feelings, you have to do some work. And whether that is in therapy or you're doing it on your own, I want to give you some tools to begin to dig down and develop a deeper insight into why you feel invisible or unheard or unseen so that you can make a plan to take positive steps towards changing those feelings. Feeling heard, feeling seen, being cared for is essential, and it's a huge part of us feeling safe. I want to say that, right? If you've listened to this podcast, you know that I talk about safety so much. And the reason why I talk about safety is because it's fundamental. Right? If you don't feel safe, you don't have trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have much else. And so we want to get into a space where we have that safety and trust, and that does come with feeling seen. I want to share reasons today why you feel invisible, at least partially, and you can then counteract those feelings and put changes in place based on some of these tips. So let's start with first the impact, the effects of feeling invisible. A lot of times people will jump to the fact that, hey, if I don't feel seen, I'm going to probably fall into depression, or it's going to trigger anxiety, or it's going to exacerbate these feelings of a lack of worth. There's a movement of being unimportant. We tend to feel more isolated and out of touch. Frustration and anger are really easy to jump into. These lower feelings, the negativity, because we feel inadequate. Feeling invisible makes us feel like there's nothing to live for. There's just loneliness and waiting for the next moment to prove that I'm not good enough. Therefore, it's imperative to acknowledge these feelings if you're beginning to feel like no one ever cares or that you're invisible. Now, let's talk about the why. Why do people feel invisible? There's many different reasons. Of course, we're going to just touch on some of those. But the first is depression, anxiety, and mental health, right? Mental health is complex. There are so many reasons why we could feel invisible. And speaking from personal experience, it's heavy to carry around that feeling like nobody sees you. It can be debilitating to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. It chips away your energy, your happiness. And for a lot of people, it even chips away the desire to live. A lot of people, when they feel anxious all the time, feel like they just are trapped inside their daily experience. And it's natural, but the first thing I want you to realize is that your mental health might be sabotaging your thoughts, leading you into a negative thought pattern. When you feel invisible, it reinforces that invisibility, right? Because remember, where our thoughts go, our experience is led. Anxiety is wicked, right? It's a beast because it tells you that you have to lead yourself into a place to calm everything down, which then generally has us rushing and running and trying and creating something out of the unknown, right? Anxiety is not having all of the information, but trying to still get to an outcome. It's an impossible feat. It leads you to question yourself. It takes away your self-confidence. It tells you that your emotions are not valid. Let's talk about some quick symptoms of depression and anxiety, because this absolutely leads to this feeling like we're not being seen. So depression, feeling hopelessness, emptiness, unexplained irritability and frustration, angry outburst, a loss of interest in the activities and the hobbies that you once loved, change in sleep cycles, a lack of energy, a change in your appetite. This is just some of the baselines for some people, not all people, right? And on particularly bad days, you might feel like you need to hide away, therefore isolating yourself, therefore what? Becoming invisible. It's a cycle that we do to ourselves a lot of times. Some symptoms of anxiety is feeling restless or wound up on edge, difficulty focusing and concentrating, becoming irritated. It's super easy, sweating and trembling and having trouble sleeping, or even hyperventilation. It's similar to depression, but anxiety can present itself in so many different ways. And when either or both are present, we have a hard time building connection with other people and certainly being seen, heard, and visible. Another thing that can make you feel invisible is that your childhood taught you to remain quiet. If you were overlooked as a child or expected to be compliant, or you were outright ignored, or there was big trauma, it's very easy to translate that feeling into your adulthood as invisibility. Growing up as an invisible child taught you that you have to prove your worth to justify your existence. You learn that your voice isn't important, so naturally you retreat inside, and that makes us feel invisible. If you grew up without loving parents or a stable household, you've internalized your emotions and you projected those feelings into the world. That's why I'm saying validation is a two-step process, and you have to learn to not overlook or undervalue those internal feelings and seek it from the outside. Children who grew up in these environments are not given the opportunity to express themselves, and we become adults that don't know where our place is in the world. It's absolutely destructive, and it carries long-lasting impacts. In order to take up space in the here and now, you have to allow yourself to be seen and heard. And that means you may need to be doing a little bit of work to heal those feelings of being invisible or underappreciated, or that you can accept who you are as you are. You accept those feelings as a child. You feel it and you recommit to taking up space in the world that you desire and deserve. Another thing that I see a lot of when people come into therapy is not using their voice or really struggling to connect with other people because of how they describe themselves as being shy. In order to have connection and form healthy relationships with other people, you have to be willing to be visible, right? You have to put yourself out there. And in today's world, we tend to see people either hyper visible because of social media or pulling back altogether. A shy person often feels that way because they actually have low self-esteem and low self-confidence. And it may not be because of trauma. It may just be because they don't have any evidence that they are wanted and needed in certain relationships or in group settings. They just may not have engaged. And so they don't know how to spend time with other people. And there's some ways that we can get past that, but it is something that I see a lot. And a lot of times people will say, well, I don't know how to use my voice. Well, why not? Where'd that come from? Were you made fun of? No. Were you in a home that didn't allow you to speak your mind? No. What is it? Well, it just never really knew how to be fully present with people. And so then we talk about radical presence. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. Another thing that I see a lot of is that social anxiety, which comes back to that shyness. It's a different level though. But social anxiety is where we feel enough anxiety that we actually keep ourselves away from other people. The effects of this is so intense that it can cause you to isolate altogether, right? Some social anxiety might be where you're second guessing yourself in front of others, where you feel apprehensive about going out or even triggered in social situations. But some people really have it so bad that it's an obstacle where they can't pick up the phone and call someone, or they can't post something on social media to remind someone that they're around. And if that's the case, the first thing that we do is we practice being present in the moment, aware. We work on fueling the mind and body with self-confidence by looking at the truth. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Some of the feeling invisible is also just about the story that you're telling. If you're stuck living in your head, you might be contributing to your feelings of being invisible, of not being heard and not being seen. Perhaps your thoughts are stuck on the replay of what happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 minutes ago, and you're second guessing everything you say, how you show up, and what to say next, and you get all worked up. And for whatever reason, that story continues on the loop. You have to make it a priority to remember that if your focus is always internal, you're going to have a hard time building external connections. You have to allow yourself, give yourself permission to be vulnerable. And sometimes people who feel invisible are those that overshare. They're real, they're raw, they're authentic. And yet people don't know what to do with that because they're not used to people being so open. Of course, there are relationships that cause invisibility. There are bad friendships, bad marriages, bad experiences. There's a host of different reasons of why we do not feel seen and heard, both internal and external. These are just a few of them. There are so many. So the question is, if you don't feel seen and heard, why? Get down to the why. And then let's talk about how not to feel that way. Unfortunately, there's not a one and done kind of answer to curing these feelings. I wish there were. It'd make my job so much easier, but it's just not, because there are several things that come up for people. But let's talk about what we can do right now to step into your power and own yourself as a friend. Get into a space where you notice a difference of your feelings. And remember that practice is progress. And any time that we want to make changes in anything that we do, we have to be practical in our forward motion. Of course, working with me or someone else, a licensed and experienced accredited therapist, is going to help you overcome these feelings. But if you can't do that, let's talk about how to change this rhythm, this impact on your own, at least to begin with. So the first thing is get in tune with your feelings. If your childhood was in a home where you didn't share your feelings, guess what? It's going to be really hard for you to talk about your feelings. Or if you feel like you were in a safe and stable environment, where does your mind go? If you've repressed a lot of negative emotions, you're going to have a hard time because repressing negativity creates detrimental impacts short-term and long-term. So you have to get into touch with your feelings. What am I feeling? What do my emotions mean? Download the emotional scale. I'll put it in the show notes. I've done it so many times. I want you to look at that. Define your feelings. And then work on increasing your comfort level of those feelings. Where do I feel happiness? Can I feel that in my body? Where do I feel loneliness or sadness? Why does this feel so uncomfortable to me? And begin to explore your feelings. One thing that I make a lot of people do is to write out a trauma list. What are these experiences that you had that were so difficult for you? And remember that trauma is anything that you connect to that didn't work for you. That's a really boiled down, simplistic definition of trauma. But write it out. What are these things? And are those things still active in the now that's making you feel like you are an outsider to your life? You can keep a mood journal. You can start a meditation practice. Talk about your feelings. Label the emotions as they come up. Get in tune with what you're feeling. That's going to change the visibility factor for you. We are beings having a human experience, and those human experiences are wrapped up and defined by our emotions. You have to feel in order to be seen and heard. And sometimes when we overfeel, we shut down. And so we have to get back in balance. What can we do to feel our way through a moment without overfeeling the moment? We also have to stop hiding. This is a big one. You cannot hide from experiences and not feel isolated. Okay? If you are always in a space where you're on your own, you are hiding. You have to stop isolating yourself. Instead, get authentic and vulnerable with the people that love you and you love them. Because if you don't, you're going to increase the perception that people don't care about you. The perception and feelings of loneliness are often a reflection of our own thoughts and our emotions rather than the reflection of other people's feelings. The factors behind self-isolation are often rooted in the same factors that fuel your loneliness. So that comes back to the question, why? Why helps us challenge and change the way we think. When we work to challenge our thoughts, when we notice that we're sinking back into ourselves, we can change our outlook and fill our mind with positivity or at least neutrality. In that, we can do these things that allows us to create a space where we can be our biggest fan. And when we do that, we allow ourselves to be seen. Sometimes we have to do whatever it takes to convince ourselves that we are worthy, that the list of never-ending to-dos are not necessarily all we have to give and to be. And from there, we can learn to communicate. Communicate your feelings rather than bottling them up. Is there a statement more powerful than "I felt left out"? I felt unwanted. I felt left out when you guys hung out last night without me. It sounded so much fun. Can you give me a call next time too? Or I really wanted to go to dinner with you guys. I didn't know you were going. Or I didn't know those communications were happening. Can you loop me in? Communication is essential. Being seen is letting others know that you want to be seen. Your feelings are important, just like everyone else's are around you. Assuming that we're talking about healthy relationships, it's okay to open up, get honest, and be a part of it all. And when we get there, you can actually give yourself the ability to understand and acknowledge that every time you reinforce this pattern of being left out, unseen, unwanted, you continue to create that same space in your thinking pattern. Your mind is fueled by whatever you tell it. If you step into the space of negativity all the time, that's the space in which you will live. Now, many of the things that I have talked about sound as if I'm blaming you for not feeling seen. And that's not true at all. It's just a matter of sometimes it is us and sometimes it's other people. And of course, you aren't alone if you feel like no one cares about you. There are many people out there going through the same thing. I've told you, I myself have felt that way. Opening up and communicating your feelings is so necessary. And then you're going to want to build those healthy relationships with people who are healthy. If you're not being seen by unhealthy people, I wouldn't necessarily chase that. We have a tendency to, right? Like, I want you to love me. You're not healthy for me. But that's what I want. Instead, look at who's healthy and then get to setting and respecting boundaries. It's crucial when you feel like no one cares about you. Not only does it empower you to take control of your own self-worth and well-being, it allows you to get ahead of that need for external validation. Furthermore, if you feel like no one cares about you, a strong lack of boundaries opens the door for someone to come in and gaslight, to be narcissistic, to take advantage of your loneliness. Weak boundaries also create situations where you care for everyone, but no one gives a damn about you. I even said the other day, no good deed goes unpunished. And that's such a negative frame of mind. Like I said, we can all get into that situation where we're thinking in that way. Is that true? No. Of course not. But we can all feel that way. So instead of being taken advantage of and having a lopsided relationship, do the best to have relationships that are healthy with people who understand this is as far as I'm willing to allow you to go. You have to stop isolating yourself and pushing people away because that's what happens when you are hurt. People who are struggling with depression or bipolar anxiety or trauma self-isolate as a means of coping. And guess what? You could be on the receiving end of that. If somebody's pushing you away, maybe it's not about you. Maybe it's them. Maybe you can be an advocate in their loneliness. Maybe you can say, hey, you know what? I see that you're self-isolating and I feel like I'm being rejected in that. I'm checking to see if this is me or is this you? This is a beautiful way to be seen on both sides. When we try to connect with people, we understand that we all have meaningful, challenging experiences. If you approach a connection with care and empathy, not only for yourself, but for other people, self-compassion becomes the guideline in which you have that relationship. It's beautiful because there's honesty and sincerity, and there's that feeling like, where have you been my whole life? Because there's nothing to hide. It's patient and respectful. It's a beautiful place where there's low-pressure interactions, where there's shared interest. And then you can also create opportunities to develop new relationships with people who you don't have that baggage with people who do see you, who want to be your cheerleader, who want to connect with you in a way that is holistic and beautiful and worthy. New opportunities mean new interactions. The benefit of attending something that's a large social event means you're going to have more opportunities to connect with different people. Small gatherings, on the other hand, give you an opportunity to have deeper, longer conversations with people. Not only does that give you a benefit of possibly connecting with that person, but it gives you an opportunity to see who's a good fit for your social circle. You may not connect with everyone. You may not be seen by everyone. But the truth is, the more vulnerable you are, the more likely you are to create authentic connections. Lastly, you can also just be yourself. Sometimes we're around the wrong people. Sometimes we are a train wreck. We're emotionally not okay. We're antisocial. We lack social skills, or we're just unpleasant to be around because we're around the wrong people. The message of just be yourself implies to the listener within you that there's nothing wrong with you. Everything you say is the personal script in which you are living by. So just be yourself. Whatever that is, as messy and quirky and adorable and train wreck as that might be, just be it. The reason that is that the watered down version of you is the most unhappy you. So being yourself, being the healthy person, allows you to be in places that you can be seen. Can you imagine walking into a room and wanting to be there because you are your wholest self? I am the most fulfilled version of me. You can identify the areas of improvement that you need to use within all the things that I just mentioned. But you can also identify that you are enough. You are enough just as you are. Just be you. And if you still feel unseen and unheard, it's time to talk to somebody. Go to my website, www.getyourlifetogethergirl.com. There's articles. There's ways to connect with me. I'm happy to find you somebody that is in your area if I'm not your match. All I want you to know is that there is emotional support and comfort for you. Out here in this big world, somebody gives a damn. So reaching out to people you don't know, like me, or someone else, may be the way that you can turn around the inner dialogue, make yourself feel seen and heard. Giving yourself the help that you need is going to change the validation factor for you. So do what you need to do. Learn to get into a space where you can validate your feelings instead of neglecting them. Get into a space where you consider your past experiences, consider external evidence, seek out new perspectives, consider your emotional state, challenge your cognitive distortions, and decide, where do I want to be? Consider your self-esteem and your self-worth. Write it all down. Give yourself a path into feeling your best. If you look at how quickly this life goes, isn't it important to choose your social interactions? Reduce communication with people who make you feel less than. Decide how you want to feel. Decide how you want to be seen. Decide how you want to be heard. Decide how you will show up and change your appetite for life. Because literally, this is your chance. This is the time where you get to decide how you are seen. Because you don't have to struggle alone. You don't have to be seen in the loneliness of your human experience. Instead, you can just be seen. Don't hesitate. Not for another minute. Don't let another little piece of living be lost. But instead, decide. When you do, it is the ultimate step into getting your life together. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life, please follow me on social media if you're not already at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Clapper, and now Threads. You can also visit my website and the show notes at getyourlifetogethergirl.com. You can also hit the notifications on whatever platform you are listening to right now so that you are alerted each week when a new episode is released. I want to thank you once again for being the most valuable part of this community. Until next time, be kind to yourself. and others.